An ex-soldier helped a lost child, not knowing she was the princess who would change his life, on a rain-soaked evening when the rest of the world had turned its back on him. Marcus Thorne pulled his worn military jacket tighter around his broad shoulders, the familiar weight of it his only comfort as the November rain penetrated the threadbare wool. 3 years since Afghanistan. 3 years since the blast. 3 years of nightmares that wouldn't quit, of flinching at car horns, of staring at the ceiling while memories crawled across it like spiders. The rain intensified, pattering against the corrugated metal awning of the bus stop where he'd taken shelter. Not that he was waiting for a bus. Not that he had anywhere to go. The modest veteran's pension barely covered the rent of his studio apartment in the forgotten corner of Westwood. A far cry from the life he'd imagined when he'd enlisted at 18, full of purpose and pride. A crack of thunder split the sky, and Marcus's body tensed instinctively. His hand flew to the space where his rifle should have been, fingers grasping at empty air. Breathe. Just breathe. The therapist at the VA had taught him techniques, but they all felt hollow in moments like these. Nothing could scrub the desert from his blood or silence the voices of men who never made it home. He was 32, but the reflection in the rain-streaked bus stop glass showed a man much older. Deep lines framing weary eyes, premature gray threading through his dark hair. The job interview earlier that day had gone exactly as the 7 before it. The moment they saw the slight tremor in his hand, the way his eyes darted to check exits, the forced smile that never quite reached those eyes, well, they had other candidates to consider. Marcus closed his eyes, listening to the rhythm of the rain. It reminded him of childhood summers in Maine, the steady patter on his grandparents' tin roof as he lay in bed reading adventure stories. Before the war, before everything changed. A small sound pierced his reverie, a hiccup or a sob, so faint he almost missed it beneath the rainfall. Marcus opened his eyes, scanning the deserted street. There, huddled against the wall of the closed bakery across the way, was a small figure. A child. For a moment he hesitated. Not his problem. Someone else would help. Someone better equipped than a broken soldier who could barely help himself. But no one else was there. Just him and a child alone in the rain. With a deep sigh that fogged in the cold air, Marcus pushed himself to his feet. His bad knee protested. Shrapnel had a way of making itself remembered on wet days, but he ignored it as he crossed the empty street. The child, a girl he could see now, couldn't have been more than 8 or 9. She wore a pale blue dress, soaked through and clinging to her small frame. Her dark hair hung in wet ropes around a face too pale, too scared. When she saw him approaching, she pressed herself further against the wall, eyes wide with fear. "Hey," Marcus said, stopping several feet away. He knew how he looked, tall, scarred, intimidating. "Are you lost?" The girl nodded almost imperceptibly, her chin quivering. A thread of recognition tugged at Marcus's mind. There was something familiar about her face, though he couldn't place it. Where are your parents?" he asked, crouching down to seem less threatening, ignoring the protest of his knee. "I don't know." Her voice was soft, accented. "European, maybe. We were in the car, and then there were bright lights, and then I was alone." Fresh tears welled in her eyes, mingling with the rain on her cheeks. Marcus glanced up and down the empty street. No sign of an accident, no emergency vehicles. How long have you been out here?" The girl shrugged, her thin shoulders rising and falling beneath the wet fabric of her dress. "The sun was still there," she whispered, pointing vaguely at the sky, now dark with storm clouds. "Hours then." Marcus felt something stir in his chest, an emotion he hadn't felt in years. Protectiveness, purpose. "I'm Marcus," he said, unzipping his jacket. It wasn't much, but it was dry on the inside. "What you want? What's your name?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Sophia." "Well, Sophia, you must be freezing." He held out his jacket. "May I?" When she nodded, he gently draped it around her shoulders. It swallowed her small frame, hanging to her ankles, but the shivering that had been racking her body began to subside. "Thank you," she murmured, clutching the edges of the jacket together with small fingers. "We should find a police station," Marcus said, glancing around. "They can help locate your parents." At the word police, Sophia's eyes widened with alarm. No police." "Please," Marcus frowned. "Your parents must be worried sick." "My father," she started, then stopped, choosing her words carefully. "There are bad people looking for me. Papa said if we get separated, don't trust anyone in uniform." Warning bells rang in Marcus's head. Was this child running from abuse? Was her father in some kind of trouble? Or was there something else going on? I need to get you somewhere safe and warm, he said finally. Do you trust me, Sophia? She studied him with eyes that seemed too old for her young face, as if she were looking straight through his skin to something underneath. Then unexpectedly, she reached out and touched the faded ribbon on his shirt, the purple heart he still wore pinned to his button-down, a habit he couldn't break. You're a soldier, she said. I was. Papa says soldiers understand honor. She nodded solemnly. I trust you. The weight of her trust settled on Marcus's shoulders, heavier than his pack had ever been in the mountains of Afghanistan. He had failed to save so many. But maybe, just maybe, he could save this one lost child. Come on, he said, offering his hand. My apartment isn't far. We can get dry, get some food in you, and figure this out. Sophia placed her small hand in his calloused palm, and they stepped out into the rain together. Unknown to Marcus, this simple act of kindness would irrevocably alter the course of his life and the future of a small European nation hanging in the balance of succession. At least Marcus's apartment was exactly what you'd expect for a man who had given up caring about his surroundings. A single room with a kitchenette in one corner, a bed pushed against the wall, and a small table with two mismatched chairs. The only decoration was a framed photo of his unit, taken in the golden light of an Afghan sunset, and a small American flag folded into a triangle. It's not much, he muttered, suddenly self-conscious as he flipped on the light. But Sophia didn't seem to mind. She stood dripping on the worn linoleum, looking around with curious eyes rather than judgment. It's warm, she said simply, and that was enough. Marcus found an old t-shirt that came down to Sophia's knees and a pair of gym shorts with a drawstring she could cinch tight around her waist. While she changed in the tiny bathroom, he put water on for hot chocolate and tried to think through their options. The responsible thing would be to call the police, but something in Sophia's reaction gave him pause. If she was telling the truth, if someone really was after her, then the police station might be the first place they'd look. And if her father had specifically warned her about people in uniform, he was still deliberating when Sophia emerged from the bathroom, swimming in his clothes, her wet hair combed back from her face. Without the rain and fear distorting her features, Marcus was again struck by a sense of familiarity. Better? He asked. She nodded, padding across the room in bare feet to accept the steaming mug he offered. Thank you. Marcus watched as she took a cautious sip, her small face relaxing as the warmth spread through her. There was a natural grace to her movements, a poise that seemed at odds with her age. Sophia, he said gently, I need to understand what happened today. So I can help you. She looked down into her mug, her face suddenly guarded. We were supposed to be secret, Papa and I. A special holiday, just us. Her brow furrowed. But they found us. Who found you? The men who want to hurt Papa. She looked up at him, eyes swimming with unshed tears. Because of what he knows. A chill ran through Marcus that had nothing to do with his wet clothes. This was sounding less like a simple case of a lost child and more like something far more dangerous. Is your father... He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Is he in some kind of trouble with the law? Sophia shook her head vigorously. Papa is the law. He is... She stopped abruptly as if catching herself. He is a very important man. In Varovnia. The name clicked into place. A small European principality nestled between Austria and the Czech Republic, known for its alpine beauty and neutrality in world conflicts. Marcus had read something recently about political unrest there, though the details escaped him. And you're from Varovnia? He asked, watching her carefully. Sophia nodded, taking another sip of her hot chocolate, leaving a small mustache of foam on her upper lip. The childish image contrasted sharply with the gravity of her words. We came to America secretly. Papa had meetings. Important ones. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He said it wasn't safe at home anymore. Not for us. And today? Marcus prompted gently. What happened in the car? Sophia's hands tightened around the mug. We were going back to the hotel. Papa was on the phone. He sounded angry. Her eyes grew distant, reliving the memory. Then another car hit us. Hard. Our driver, Emil, he yelled for Papa to run. To take me and run. A single tear slid down her cheek. There were men with guns. Papa pulled me from the car. We ran down an alley. He told me to hide, that he would lead them away. Her voice broke. He promised he would come back for me. Marcus felt his military training kick in, assessing the situation with a cold clarity. If what Sophia was saying was true, her father was likely a high-ranking government official, possibly targeted for assassination. And if they had been in an official diplomatic vehicle when attacked, this was an international incident. But why hadn't it made the news? Why weren't police swarming the streets looking for a missing foreign dignitary and his daughter? Unless someone was working very hard to keep it quiet. Sophia, Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm, I need you to tell me exactly who your father is. She looked at him for a long moment, her young face a battlefield of caution and desperation. Then, reaching some internal decision, she straightened her shoulders. My father is King Alexander, she said with quiet dignity, and I am Sophia Eleonora Katerina Volkov, Crown Princess of Vorovnia. The mug nearly slipped from Marcus's hand. A princess, not just any lost child, but European royalty. The absurdity of it, a broken ex-soldier sheltering a princess in his dingy apartment, might have made him laugh if the fear in Sophia's eyes hadn't been so real. I know you might not believe me, she continued, misreading his shock. Papa says most Americans don't know much about Vorovnia. I believe you, Marcus said, surprising himself with the truth of it. Now that she'd said it, he could see it clearly. Her face had seemed familiar because he'd glimpsed it in newspapers, in the background of photos during state visits. But Sophia, this is serious. We need to contact your embassy. Her face clouded with fresh fear. No, Papa said the traitors are inside too. Trust no one until I come for you. Those were his last words to me. Marcus ran a hand through his damp hair, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. What the hell was he supposed to do with a foreign princess? His life was barely held together with safety pins and stubborn pride. But as he looked at Sophia, this child who had endured so much in a single day, who was showing more courage than most grown men he'd known, he knew he couldn't abandon her. Okay, he said, making a decision. You'll stay here tonight. In the morning, we'll figure out a way to safely contact your father or someone we can trust. Deal? Relief flooded her face. Deal. Then, with a formality that would have been comical in any other situation, she extended her small hand. I am in your debt, Mr. Marcus. He took her hand, feeling an odd sensation as her tiny fingers disappeared into his palm. This was crazy, absolutely insane. And yet, for the first time in 3 years, the constant static of his thoughts had quieted. There was only this moment, this purpose: keep Sophia safe. Just Marcus is fine, Your Highness. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Then I am just Sophia. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the traces of their journey through the city. And somewhere in the darkness, men were searching for the child who now slept in Marcus Thorne's bed, while he kept watch from a chair by the window, a kitchen knife on the table beside him, his senses more alert than they had been since he'd left the battlefield. For the first time in years, someone needed him. And that, Marcus realized with a start, made all the difference. Marcus woke with a jolt, his neck stiff from sleeping upright in the chair. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting slats of gold across the worn linoleum floor. For a moment, confusion gripped him. Why was he sleeping in a chair? Then his eyes fell on the small form curled in his bed, and memory crashed back. Princess Sophia. The attack. Her father missing. He checked his watch, 7:38 a.m. They had made it through the night without incident, but daylight brought new challenges. They couldn't stay holed up in his apartment forever. Moving quietly so as not to wake Sophia, Marcus pulled out his laptop, an ancient thing that protested with a whirring fan as he booted it up. He needed information. A quick search confirmed what Sophia had told him. King Alexander of Vorovnia was indeed on an unofficial visit to the United States, supposedly for medical treatment at Johns Hopkins. The latest news showed him arriving 5 days ago, but nothing since. No mention of an attack, no public alert about a missing princess, which meant either Sophia was mistaken about what had happened, or someone was suppressing the information. Marcus dug deeper, searching for any reports of traffic accidents or violence in the downtown area yesterday. Nothing that matched Sophia's description. But there was a small item about a disturbance near the Fairmont Hotel, with police responding to reports of gunfire, only to find nothing amiss. The Fairmont, one of the most exclusive hotels in the city, where foreign dignitaries often stayed. It fit. With growing unease, Marcus searched for information about Vorovnia itself. The small nation had been relatively stable for decades under the Volkov dynasty, but recent reports hinted at political turmoil. King Alexander's younger brother, Prince Victor, had publicly criticized the king's progressive reforms, which included opening the line of succession to include females. This meant Sophia, as Alexander's only child, would one day be queen. something the traditionalist faction vehemently opposed. What are you looking for? Marcus startled, turning to find Sophia standing beside him, her hair tousled from sleep, his oversized shirt hanging like a nightgown on her small frame. Information, he said, quickly closing the tab with the more alarming political analysis. Did you sleep okay? She nodded, rubbing her eyes. What time is it? Papa will be worried. The innocent concern in her voice twisted something in Marcus's chest. How did he explain that her father might be in grave danger, or worse? It's morning, he said instead. Are you hungry? I can make pancakes. Her face brightened instantly. I love pancakes. The cook at the palace makes them with blueberries shaped like stars. Marcus smiled despite himself. Well, I can't promise stars, but I do have some blueberries in the freezer. As he mixed the batter and heated the skillet, he watched Sophia from the corner of his eye. She'd climbed onto one of the mismatched chairs, legs swinging, examining the framed photo of his unit. Are these your friends? She asked. Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his throat. Yes, my squad. Oh, where are they now? The question, so innocent, so devastating, halted his stirring. Most of them didn't come home. Sophia's legs stopped swinging. She studied the photo more closely, then looked at him with those ancient eyes in a child's face. You miss them? It wasn't a question. Every day. She nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense to her. I miss my mother too. Papa says she watches over me from heaven. Marcus hadn't known the queen had died. I'm sorry about your mom. I was very little. I don't remember her, not really. Sophia traced the edge of the frame with a finger. But sometimes I think I can feel her. Like when the wind smells like roses, or when I'm afraid and suddenly feel brave. The simplicity of her faith pierced him. Marcus had long ago stopped believing in anything he couldn't see or touch. Had stopped believing the universe cared one way or another about the suffering of men. But looking at Sophia, he almost wished he could believe in guardian angels and protective spirits. He poured batter onto the hot skillet, watching it bubble. Sophia, he said carefully, I need to ask you some hard questions about yesterday. Is that okay? She tensed but nodded. You mentioned men with guns. Did you see their faces? Were they wearing uniforms or regular clothes? Sophia's brow furrowed in concentration. Regular clothes. Dark suits like Papa's security, but they weren't our people. I know all of Papa's guards. She hesitated. One of them said something to the other. Not in English. Not in Varovnian either. Could you tell what language? She shook her head. But the man who seemed to be the leader, he had a scar. She traced a line from the corner of her eye down her cheek. Like this. And when he smiled, it looked wrong. Marcus flipped the pancakes, his mind racing. Professional hit men, most likely. The scar might be identifiable if they could get this information to the right people. But who were the right people? Did your father ever mention someone specific that you should contact if you were in trouble? Someone outside the regular security channels? Sophia thought for a moment, then her eyes widened. Dr. Hassaruwan wanted to watch him. Bennett, Papa's American friend. He said if anything ever happened, I should find Dr. Bennett. Do you know Doctor? Bennett's first name? Where to find him? Her, Sophia corrected. Dr. Eleanor Bennett. She works at the university. She studies Varovnian history. Papa always visits her when he comes to America. A lead. Not much, but something. Marcus placed a stack of blueberry pancakes in front of Sophia, his mind already formulating a plan. Eat up, princess. We've got work to do. As Sophia attacked her breakfast with surprising gusto for such a small child, Marcus gathered their few resources. His old military backpack, the emergency cash he kept taped behind the bathroom mirror, just over $300. His phone, which was prepaid and untraceable, a change of clothes for himself, and his smallest t-shirt for Sophia, which they could belt with a shoelace to make it fit better. And his service pistol, a Beretta M9 he'd kept registered and legal, locked in a small safe on the top shelf of his closet. He hesitated, looking at Sophia happily swinging her legs as she ate. He hated the idea of bringing a gun anywhere near her. But if the men who had attacked the king's motorcade were still looking for her, better to have it and not need it. While Sophia washed up, Marcus quickly loaded the pistol and secured it in a holster at the small of his back, covering it with his jacket. Then he helped Sophia fashion a makeshift outfit from his clothes, rolling up the sleeves and pant legs until she could move without tripping. We look silly, she giggled, striking a pose in her oversized attire. But practical, Marcus replied, surprised by the smile tugging at his lips. We need to get you some proper clothes, but this will do for now. He knelt before her, his face growing serious. Sophia, I need you to listen carefully. We're going to find Dr. Bennett, but we have to be very careful. If the men looking for you see us, they might try to take you away. Fear flickered in her eyes, but she squared her small shoulders. What should I do? Stay close to me. If I tell you to run, you run. If I tell you to hide, you hide. And if anything happens to me, the words caught in his throat, you find a police officer and tell them exactly who you are. Okay? Sophia nodded, her expression grave beyond her years. Then unexpectedly, she threw her arms around his neck, hugging him fiercely. Thank you for helping me, Marcus. The simple gratitude undid him. How long had it been since he'd been hugged? Since anyone had looked at him with such innocent trust? Marcus awkwardly patted her back, a lump forming in his throat. Come on, Your Highness, he said, his voice rough. Our adventure awaits. As they stepped out into the morning sunlight, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He took Sophia's small hand in his, scanning the quiet street with the hypervigilance that had kept him alive in Afghanistan. Nothing seemed amiss, but the prickling at the back of his neck persisted. They moved quickly toward the bus stop, Marcus's eyes constantly sweeping their surroundings. He didn't notice the dark sedan parked half a block away, or the man inside who lifted a phone to his ear as they passed. Target acquired, the man said softly, his finger tracing the scar that ran down his cheek. The girl is with a civilian, proceeding as planned. The university campus sprawled across several city blocks, a mix of modern glass structures and ivy-covered brick building that had stood for over a century. Marcus kept Sophia close as they navigated through groups of students, feeling conspicuously out of place among the backpack-laden youths rushing between classes. They had taken a circuitous route to get here, switching buses twice and walking several blocks, Marcus's combat-honed instincts keeping him alert for any sign of pursuit. So far, nothing had triggered his alarm bells, but he wasn't about to let his guard down. Do you know where Dr. Bennett's office is? He asked Sophia quietly as they paused near a campus directory. She shook her head. I've never been here. Papa always met her at the hotel or at nice restaurants. Marcus scanned the directory, looking for any mention of Varovnian studies or perhaps Eastern European history. Nothing jumped out. Excuse me, he said, stopping a passing student. We're looking for Dr. Eleanor Bennett. Do you know where her office might be? The young woman adjusted her glasses. Dr. Wanima Sharanpuram. Bennett? Yeah, she's in the International Studies building. 3rd floor, I think. She pointed to a red brick building across the quad. That one. Thanks. Marcus nodded, guiding Sophia forward. Is she nice? Sophia asked as they crossed the open space, her small hand gripping his tightly. Dr. Saraswamy Bennett? I don't know her, Marcus admitted, but your father trusts her, and that's good enough for now. The International Studies building was quieter than the busy quad, their footsteps echoing on the polished floors as they climbed to the 3rd floor. A directory on the wall listed faculty offices. Dr. Sarashon, Eleanor Bennett, room 312. They found the door easily enough. Dark wood with a frosted glass window bearing her name and title. Dr. Eleanor Bennett, Ph.D., Professor of Eastern European Studies. Marcus knocked firmly, his other hand still holding Sophia's. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. Silence. She must be teaching a class, Marcus muttered, trying to ignore the disappointment that settled in his stomach. They had pinned their hopes on finding this woman who might not even be on campus today. Sophia's face fell. What do we do now? Before Marcus could answer, a voice called from down the hall. Are you looking for Dr. Bennett? They turned to see an older man emerging from another office, a stack of papers under one arm. Yes, Marcus replied cautiously. Do you know when she'll be back? The man's bushy eyebrows drew together. I'm afraid Eleanor won't be in today. Family emergency, she left for Belgrade last night. Quite suddenly, actually. He studied them curiously. Are you former students? Marcus felt Sophia's hand tighten in his. Belgrade, the capital of Serbia, which bordered Varovnia. The timing couldn't be coincidence. We had an appointment, Marcus lied smoothly. I guess it slipped her mind with the emergency. Did she say when she'd be back? The professor shook his head. No, but given the circumstances, I wouldn't expect her for at least a week. Her niece was in some kind of accident. He paused, then added, I could take a message if you'd like. That won't be necessary, but thank you. Marcus nodded politely and turned away, guiding Sophia back toward the stairs. Once they were out of earshot, Sophia looked up at him with worried eyes. She's not here. What do we do now? Marcus's mind raced. This family emergency sounded suspiciously like a cover story. If Dr. Whatever were in Wasum, Bennett was truly King Alexander's trusted ally, she might have been summoned to Belgrade after the attack, perhaps to help coordinate a response or to serve as an intermediary. But that left them without their one solid lead. We need to regroup, Marcus said, keeping his voice steady for Sophia's benefit as they descended the stairs. Find somewhere safe to think. As they stepped outside the building, the hairs on the back of Marcus's neck stood up. Something was wrong. The quad, which had been bustling with students earlier, now seemed emptier. And the few people who remained moved with a purpose that felt off. Men in casual clothes positioned too strategically. A woman speaking quietly into a phone, her eyes tracking their movement. Sophia, Marcus said under his breath. We need to move quickly. Don't run, but stay close. The little girl nodded, sensing the tension in his voice. They began walking across the quad, Marcus fighting every instinct to break into a sprint. Running would only confirm they were the targets. There's a coffee shop just off campus, he said, trying to sound casual. We can stop there, get something to eat. Okay, Sophia replied, matching his forced lightness. They were halfway across the open space when Marcus spotted him. A man with a distinctive scar running down his right cheek, exactly as Sophia had described. He was walking directly toward them, one hand suspiciously inside his jacket. Change of plans, Marcus murmured, abruptly changing direction. We're going to that building instead. He steered Sophia toward the nearest structure, a massive library with multiple entrances and, hopefully, multiple exits. As they quickened their pace, Marcus risked a glance back. The scarred man had altered his course to follow them, and now two others were converging from different directions. They weren't being subtle anymore. They knew they'd been spotted. Marcus? Sophia's voice trembled. It's okay, he lied, heart pounding as they reached the library steps. Everything's going to be okay. They pushed through the heavy doors into the cool, book-scented interior. Students sat at long tables, hunched over laptops and textbooks. A security guard nodded at them from near the entrance. Marcus spotted what he was looking for, a floor plan mounted on the wall. This way, he said, pulling Sophia toward a sign marked Stacks. They needed to get lost in the labyrinth of bookshelves, find a back exit, disappear before their pursuers caught up. They had just rounded a corner into the first row of towering shelves when the library doors banged open. Marcus risked a peek around the edge of the shelving unit. The scarred man had entered, along with another man in a dark jacket. They split up, moving methodically through the library's open area. We need to hide, Marcus whispered, guiding Sophia deeper into the stacks. The rows of shelves created a maze-like structure, poorly lit and confusing to navigate. Perfect for losing pursuers or for being trapped. Sophia's breathing came in short, frightened gasps. They found us. They haven't found us yet, Marcus assured her, though his own pulse was racing. His hand instinctively moved to the small of his back, feeling the reassuring weight of the Beretta. But he couldn't start a gunfight in a university library full of innocent students. They moved swiftly through the dimly lit rows, turning randomly, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the entrance. Marcus's mind worked furiously. The library should have a service entrance, or at least a fire exit. They just needed to find it without running into their pursuers. Sophia stumbled, fatigue and fear catching up with her. Marcus scooped her up without breaking stride, her slight weight hardly a burden against his chest. I'm scared, she whispered against his neck. I know, he murmured, his chin brushing the top of her head. But I won't let them take you. I promise. He meant it. In the short time he'd known her, this brave, remarkable child had awakened something in him that he'd thought long dead. A fierce protectiveness, a willingness to fight. For 3 years, he'd been merely existing. Now suddenly, he had something worth fighting for. They reached a small alcove with a window looking out onto a side street. Below the window was an emergency exit with an alarm bar. If we push that, an alarm will sound. Marcus explained quietly, setting Sophia down. It'll create confusion. Give us cover to get away. But we'll only have seconds. Are you ready to run? Sophia's face was pale, but she nodded resolutely. I'm ready. Marcus peered carefully around the edge of the alcove, checking for any sign of their pursuers. The stacks appeared empty, but he could hear footsteps, voices. They were methodically searching each row. On 3, he whispered, positioning himself at the emergency door. 1, 2, there they are! A shout echoed through the stacks. Center. 3. Marcus slammed his palm against the bar. The alarm blared, shockingly loud in the quiet library. Marcus pushed Sophia through the door and followed immediately after, pulling it shut behind them. They emerged onto a narrow service alley running alongside the building. "Run!" Marcus urged, taking Sophia's hand again. They sprinted down the alley as shouts erupted behind them. The emergency door burst open, and Marcus heard the distinctive sound of a gun being cocked. Instinct took over. He swung Sophia behind a dumpster just as a shot rang out, the bullet ricocheting off brick where they had been standing seconds before. In one fluid motion, Marcus drew his Beretta and returned fire, not aiming to kill, but to buy them precious seconds. His shot struck the brick near the door, sending the gunman diving for cover. "Stay down," he ordered Sophia, who huddled behind the dumpster, eyes wide with terror. Marcus fired once more toward the door, then holstered his weapon and scooped Sophia into his arms. "Cover your ears," he told her, then ran full tilt down the alley, zigzagging to make them a harder target. More shouts behind them. Another shot, wild and desperate, struck a metal drain pipe far to their left. They burst out of the alley onto a busy street, the sound of the library alarm fading behind them. Without slowing, Marcus cut across traffic, ignoring angry honks, and ducked into a crowded department store on the opposite side. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently, setting Sophia down once they were safely inside the bustling store. His heart hammered in his chest, adrenaline coursing through his veins. She shook her head, though tears streamed down her face. "You're bleeding," she whispered, pointing to his arm. Marcus glanced down, surprised to see a dark stain spreading on his sleeve. One of the bullets must have grazed him. Now that he was aware of it, the wound began to throb. "It's just a scratch," he assured her, though the blood seeping through the fabric suggested otherwise. "Come on, we need to keep moving." They wound their way through racks of clothing, Marcus's eyes constantly scanning for threats. The store had multiple levels and several exits. Good for losing pursuers, but also for being cornered. "We need to change your appearance," he said, grabbing a child-sized hoodie from a display. "And mine too." Quickly, he selected a baseball cap and a different jacket for himself, and a pair of jeans and sneakers for Sophia. The price tags made him wince. The items would consume most of his emergency cash, but anonymity was worth every penny. In a family changing room, Sophia changed into her new clothes while Marcus kept watch through the cracked door. He removed his own blood-stained shirt, wincing as the fabric stuck to the wound on his upper arm. The bullet had carved a deep furrow through the muscle, but luckily hadn't hit anything vital. Using his old shirt, he fashioned a makeshift bandage to stem the bleeding, then pulled on the new jacket to cover it. "Better?" Sophia asked when she emerged, looking heartbreakingly normal in her jeans and purple hoodie. "Perfect." Marcus nodded, pulling the baseball cap low over his eyes. "Remember natural movements. We're just a dad and his daughter shopping." Dad and daughter. The word sent an unexpected pang through his chest. They paid cash for the clothes they were already wearing, then exited through a different door than they'd entered, emerging onto a side street several blocks from the university. "Who were those men?" Sophia asked, her voice small but steady as they walked briskly away from the store. "I think they're the same ones who attacked your father's car," Marcus replied grimly. "Which means they're professionals, well-funded, and determined. Are they going to kill me like they killed Papa?" The question was asked with such directness that it stopped Marcus in his tracks. He crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Listen to me, Sophia. We don't know that your father is dead. He could be hiding just like you. Or he could be rescued already looking for you right now." Hope flickered in her eyes. "Really? Really?" he said, wishing he felt as confident as he sounded. "And we're going to find him. But first, we need somewhere safe to regroup." Marcus knew they couldn't return to his apartment. It would be the first place their pursuers would look. Hotels required ID. They needed a place off the grid, somewhere no one would think to search for a princess and an ex-soldier. An idea struck him. Someone who might help, might shelter them, at least for a night while he figured out their next move. "I know where we can go," he said, standing again and taking Sophia's hand. "It's a bit of a walk. Can you make it?" She nodded bravely, though exhaustion was evident in the droop of her shoulders and the shadows beneath her eyes. This child had endured more in the past 24 hours than most people faced in a lifetime. As they moved through the city streets, blending with the afternoon crowds, Marcus kept a vigilant eye for any sign of pursuit. But his mind was elsewhere, on the weight of responsibility he had shouldered, on the trust shining in Sophia's eyes when she looked at him, on the strange twist of fate that had brought a lost princess into the life of a lost soldier. He had failed to save so many. He wouldn't fail her. The neighborhood had changed since Marcus last visited. More gentrification, trendy cafes where there used to be liquor stores. But the old auto repair shop still stood on the corner, its faded sign reading Wilson and Son Automotive, hanging at a slight angle. The and Son part had always been aspirational on Old Man Wilson's part. His only child was a daughter, and she had never shown the slightest interest in carburetors or timing belts. "Who lives here?" Sophia asked as they approached the shop. The day was waning, long shadows stretching across the street. They had taken a circular route, doubling back and changing directions several times to ensure they weren't followed. "An old friend," Marcus replied, though friend might be stretching it. He hadn't spoken to Danny Wilson in almost 2 years, not since he'd pushed away everyone who tried to help after his return. The repair bay doors were closed, but lights still glowed from the office. A sign in the window read, "Closed," but Marcus knew Danny often worked late, tinkering with engines long after the shop had officially shut down for the day. He rapped on the office door, stepping back so she could see him through the glass. A figure emerged from beneath a raised hood, wiping greasy hands on a rag. Danny Wilson hadn't changed much. Still lean and angular, dark hair now streaked with premature gray, pulled back in a messy ponytail. She squinted through the glass, recognition dawning slowly. Her face registered surprise, then wariness as she approached the door. She unlocked it but didn't open it fully. "Marcus Thorne," she said, her voice neutral. "I've been a while." "Hello, Danny." He shifted uncomfortably. "I know this is unexpected. 2 years, 3 months, and about 16 days of unexpected." She cut in, her gaze sharp. Then her eyes dropped to Sophia, standing half hidden behind Marcus. Something in Danny's expression softened. "Who's this?" "This is Sophia," Marcus said, placing a protective hand on the girl's shoulder. She's in trouble. We both are. We need a place to lie low, just for tonight." Danny's eyes narrowed, taking in Marcus's tense posture, the dried blood visible at the edge of his sleeve. Sophia's exhausted face. "What kind of trouble?" she asked quietly. "The kind where explaining puts you at risk too," Marcus replied. "I wouldn't be here if I had anywhere else to go, Danny. I swear." A long moment passed as Danny studied them. Then, with a sigh that seemed to contain equal parts resignation and concern, she pushed the door open wider. "Get in here before someone sees you." Relief flooded through Marcus as he ushered Sophia inside. The office smelled of motor oil and the strong coffee Danny had always preferred. A half-eaten sandwich sat on the desk beside a laptop showing some kind of engine schematic. Danny locked the door behind them, then flipped a switch that lowered metal security shutters over the windows. "The apartment upstairs still a mess?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. "Of course it is." "Come on." She led them through the back of the shop to a staircase that ascended to the second floor. The small apartment above the repair shop had been Old Man Wilson's home for 40 years, until a stroke had sent him to assisted living. Now it served as Danny's crash pad on nights when she worked too late to drive home. The space was sparse but clean. A pull-out couch, a kitchenette, a small bathroom. Tools and car magazines were stacked neatly on a coffee table. The walls were bare except for a vintage poster of a 1967 Mustang and a framed photograph of Danny as a teenager with her father, both grinning in front of the shop. "You can stay here tonight," Danny said, crossing her arms. "But I want some answers, Marcus. Not the full story if it's too dangerous, but enough that I know what I'm getting into." Marcus nodded, his hand still resting protectively on Sophia's shoulder. "That's fair. But first I need to take care of this." He gestured to his arm. "And Sophia needs rest and food." Danny's gaze softened as she looked at the exhausted child. "There's a first aid kit in the bathroom. And I've got soup I can heat up." She crouched down to Sophia's level. "You like tomato soup, kiddo?" Sophia nodded shyly. "Yes, ma'am." "Ma'am?" Danny repeated with an amused snort. "Well, aren't you polite?" She straightened up. "Bathroom's through there, Marcus. I'll get the soup started." While Danny busied herself in the kitchenette, Marcus led Sophia to the couch. "Rest here for a bit, okay? I need to clean up, then we'll eat." "Are we safe here?" Sophia whispered, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar space. "Yes," Marcus assured her with more confidence than he felt. "Danny's good people. No one will look for us here." In the small bathroom, Marcus peeled off his jacket and examined the wound in the harsh fluorescent light. It looked worse than it felt, a deep graze that had torn through muscle but missed any major blood vessels. Using supplies from the first aid kit, he cleaned the wound thoroughly, applied antiseptic, and bandaged it as best he could. Field medicine had been part of his training, and he'd patched up worse in Afghanistan. When he emerged, Sophia was curled on the couch, already half asleep despite her best efforts to keep her eyes open. Danny stood watching her, a strange expression on her face. "She's exhausted," Marcus said quietly, moving to stand beside his old friend. What have you gotten yourself into, Marcus? Danny murmured, turning to face him. Her eyes dropped to his freshly bandaged arm. Is that a bullet wound? He nodded grimly. Like I said, trouble. Danny let out a long breath. The soup needs a few minutes. Come sit, tell me what you can. They moved to the kitchenette table, positioned where they could keep an eye on Sophia while speaking quietly. She looks like she belongs on a billboard somewhere, Danny observed. Not exactly the kind of kid who ends up running from people with guns. Who is she? Marcus hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. She's important. People are looking for her. Dangerous people. I found her alone, scared. I couldn't just leave her. So you appointed yourself her protector? Danny raised an eyebrow. Since when do you care about anyone but yourself? The barb stung, but Marcus couldn't deny he deserved it. After returning from Afghanistan, he'd retreated into himself, shutting out everyone who tried to help, including Danny, who had offered him a job, a purpose, when no one else would. I know I've been difficult, he admitted. After everything that happened over there, I couldn't let anyone in. Danny finished for him. I get it. I've never been to war, but I know what it's like to lose people. She glanced at the photo of her father. But at some point, you have to start living again. I'm trying, Marcus said simply. Helping Sophia, it's the first thing that's felt right in a long time. Something in his voice must have convinced her, because Danny's expression softened. Well, you picked a hell of a way to rejoin the land of the living. She stood to check on the soup. So what's the plan? You can't just keep running. We were trying to find someone who might help us contact her father. But that didn't pan out. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. I need to figure out our next move. Somewhere she'll be safe while I try to find out what's really going on. Her father, Danny repeated, giving him a searching look. Marcus, are you mixing yourself up in some kind of custody dispute? Because if you've kidnapped someone's kid, it's not like that. Marcus interrupted firmly. Her father's in danger too. Maybe worse. Danny stirred the soup thoughtfully. You know what's funny? There was something on the news earlier about a missing diplomat or something. European guy. They were pretty vague about the details. Marcus tensed. What exactly did they say? Just that authorities were looking for information about a visiting dignitary who missed some important meeting. Said it might be a misunderstanding, but they seemed pretty worked up about it. She shrugged. I wasn't really paying attention. A misunderstanding. Marcus could read between the lines. Someone was controlling the narrative, keeping the king's disappearance from becoming a full-blown international incident while they searched for Sophia. Did they show a picture? He asked. Yeah, some official-looking guy. Dark hair, beard. Danny narrowed her eyes. Why? Is that her dad? Before Marcus could answer, Sophia stirred on the couch, sitting up groggily. Is the food ready? I'm very hungry. Coming right up, princess. Danny called, then froze as she caught Marcus's alarmed expression. What? It's just an expression, but understanding dawned on her face as she looked between Marcus and Sophia. No way, she whispered. No freaking way. Is she actually… Soup? Marcus interrupted pointedly. Remember? Danny shook her head in disbelief but turned back to the stove. You are going to tell me everything once she's asleep, she muttered under her breath. They ate at the small table, Sophia perking up with each spoonful of soup. Danny had added grilled cheese sandwiches, which the little princess devoured with decidedly unroyal enthusiasm. This is delicious, she declared, cheese stretching from the sandwich to her mouth. Our chef never makes them this way. Your chef, huh? Danny raised an eyebrow at Marcus, who gave a small shake of his head. After dinner, exhaustion caught up with Sophia again. Danny found an old t-shirt that would serve as a nightgown, and within minutes of lying down on the pull-out couch, the princess was sound asleep. Marcus gently pulled a blanket over her, something tightening in his chest as he watched her peaceful face. In sleep, she looked like any ordinary child, not the heir to a European throne, not a girl being hunted by killers, just a little girl who deserved to be safe. Okay, Danny said quietly, motioning him back to the kitchenette. Spill it, and don't leave anything out. Marcus sighed, sinking into a chair. The events of the day had caught up with him, his wounded arm throbbing, fatigue pressing down like a physical weight. Her name is Sophia Volkov, he began, keeping his voice low. She's the crown princess of Vorovnia. Yesterday, her father, King Alexander, was attacked while they were visiting the city. She got separated from him during the attack, and I found her alone on the street. Danny's eyes widened with each word. Holy shit, she breathed. And the people after her? Professional hitmen, as far as I can tell. Well organized, well funded. Marcus rubbed his face tiredly. We tried to find an ally of her father's today, but she'd suddenly left the country. Then the men found us at the university. That's when you got shot, Danny surmised, glancing at his bandaged arm. Marcus nodded. They're not just trying to kidnap her, Danny. They're trying to kill her. But why? She's just a kid. Politics, Marcus said grimly. King Alexander changed the laws so she could inherit the throne. There are powerful people who don't want that to happen. Danny let out a low whistle. So you've basically stumbled into an international assassination plot. Only you, Marcus. She shook her head. What are you going to do? It was the question that had been haunting him since they'd fled the university. What was his plan? He couldn't keep running forever. Couldn't keep Sophia safe indefinitely against professional killers. I need to find out if her father is alive, he said finally. And I need to get her somewhere truly secure, an embassy maybe, or federal authorities who can't be compromised. And how exactly do you plan to do that? Marcus was silent for a moment. I don't know yet, but I will. Danny studied him, her expression softening. You care about her. It wasn't a question, but Marcus nodded anyway. I can't explain it. 24 hours ago, I didn't know she existed. But now, he trailed off, unable to articulate the fierce protectiveness he felt. She brings out the person you used to be, Danny said quietly. The guy who would move heaven and earth to protect his squad. The guy who wouldn't leave anyone behind. Marcus glanced back at Sophia's sleeping form. I let them down. My squad. I survived when they didn't. And you think that was your fault? Danny asked gently. I was their leader. Huey. You were their brother, she countered. And sometimes, no matter how much we love people, we can't save them. She reached across the table, her hand covering his. But maybe you can save her. The simple touch, the first human contact he'd allowed himself in months, apart from Sophia, broke something open inside him. A dam he'd built to hold back all the grief and guilt and loneliness of the past 3 years. I'm trying, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. I have to try. Danny squeezed his hand, then released it. Get some rest. You look like hell. We'll figure out next steps in the morning. She stood and gathered their dishes. You can take the recliner. It's not comfortable, but it's better than the floor. As she turned toward the sink, Marcus caught her arm gently. Danny, thank you. She gave him a crooked smile. Don't thank me yet. We still have to figure out how to keep a princess alive and find a missing king. She glanced at Sophia. But she's lucky she found you, Marcus. Whatever else happened over there, you're still the most stubborn protector I've ever known. Later, as Marcus settled into the recliner position where he could see both the door and Sophia, he found himself studying the sleeping child. In less than 2 days, she had somehow become the center of his world. A responsibility, yes, but also something more. A purpose. A reason to be the man he once was, before war and loss had hollowed him out. I'll keep you safe, he whispered to her sleeping form. Whatever it takes. Outside, the city continued its nighttime rhythm, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the small apartment above an auto repair shop. And somewhere, men with guns were still searching, still plotting, drawing ever closer to the princess and the broken soldier who had appointed himself her guardian. Marcus woke with a start, momentarily disoriented in the unfamiliar surroundings. Pale morning light filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the pull-out couch where Sophia still slept, curled into a tight ball beneath the blanket. A noise from the kitchenette drew his attention. Danny stood at the counter, keeping her movements quiet as she prepared coffee. Time? Marcus asked, his voice rough with sleep. Just after 6, Danny replied softly. Coffee? He nodded, easing himself out of the recliner, wincing as his stiff muscles protested. The gunshot wound on his arm throbbed dully beneath its bandage. How's it feeling? Danny asked, nodding toward his injury. I'll live. Marcus accepted the mug she offered, savoring the bitter warmth. Thanks for this. All of this. Danny leaned against the counter, studying him over the rim of her own mug. I've been thinking about your situation. You need information, right? About whether the king is alive? About who's behind the attack? Marcus nodded. And a way to contact someone we can trust. I might be able to help with the information part. Danny said. There's this guy, Jake Mercer. Works at the Tribune. Investigative reporter. If something fishy is going on with a foreign dignitary in our city, he might know about it, or know how to find out. A reporter? Marcus frowned. Isn't that risky? Jake's solid. We dated briefly a few years back. Didn't work out romantically, but we stayed friends. He's got sources everywhere. Police, city hall, you name it. Danny set down her mug. and he's discreet when he needs to be. Marcus considered it. They needed information, and right now they had none. Can you contact him without mentioning Sophia or me? I can try. Say I heard something weird. Ask if he knows anything about the missing diplomat. Danny shrugged. Worth a shot, right? Before Marcus could answer, a small voice interrupted. Nah. Good morning. They turned to see Sophia sitting up on the couch, her dark hair tousled from sleep, looking impossibly small in Danny's oversized t-shirt. Morning, Princess. Danny greeted with a smile. Sleep okay? Sophia nodded, rubbing her eyes. Where are we going today? She asked, looking to Marcus. The simple question, asked with such trust, squeezed something in Marcus's chest. She expected him to have a plan, to know how to keep her safe. First breakfast, he said, forcing confidence into his voice. Then we're going to try to get some information about your father. Do you think we'll find him today? Hope brightened her features. Marcus exchanged a glance with Danny. I don't know, Sophia, but we're going to try our best. While Danny prepared a simple breakfast, Marcus helped Sophia freshen up, lending her a spare toothbrush and helping her comb the tangles from her hair with gentle hands that belied his military background. You're good at this, Sophia observed as he worked a knot from her dark locks. Do you have children? The innocent question caught him off guard. No, he said softly. I don't. Well, why not? She persisted. Marcus hesitated. How to explain to a child his deliberate isolation, his fear of attachment after losing so many he'd cared about? I guess I never found the right person to have a family with, he said finally. Sophia considered this. My father says finding the right person is like finding a perfect star in the sky. You don't look for it. It finds you when you're not expecting it. Out of the mouths of babes, Marcus thought. Your father sounds like a wise man. He is, Sophia said with absolute certainty. That's why he's a good king. After breakfast, Danny made the call to her reporter friend, keeping the conversation deliberately vague. Marcus listened intently, trying to gauge from her side of the conversation whether Jake Mercer knew anything useful. Yeah, that diplomatic thing on the news, Danny was saying. Seemed weird, right? Like they weren't telling the whole story. She paused, listening. Really? That's interesting. No, just curious. You know me, mechanical mind, need to know how things work. Another pause. Coffee? Sure, I could do later this morning. When she hung up, her expression was troubled. He wouldn't say much over the phone, but he definitely knows something. We're meeting at a cafe in an hour. We should go with you, Marcus said immediately. Danny shook her head. Too risky. If someone is watching him or me, it would expose you both. I'll go alone, find out what he knows, then come straight back. Marcus didn't like it, but she was right. Be careful. These people are professionals. I'm just a mechanic getting coffee with an old friend, Danny reminded him. Nothing suspicious about that. After she left, the apartment felt smaller somehow, quieter. Sophia sat cross-legged on the couch, flipping through one of Danny's car magazines with idle curiosity. Do you like cars? Marcus asked, sitting beside her. Not really, she admitted, but I like the colors. This one is the same blue as the Royal Guard's uniforms. She pointed to a cobalt blue sports car. Do you miss home? The question slipped out before he could reconsider it. Sophia was quiet for a moment, her small face thoughtful. I miss the gardens, and Chef Henri's apple tarts. And Katerina, she's my tutor. She set the magazine aside. But Papa says home isn't a place, it's people who love you. So as long as I find Papa again, I'll be home. The simple wisdom of her words struck Marcus deeply. Home is people, not a place. It had been so long since he'd felt at home anywhere. With anyone. We'll find him, he promised, though uncertainty gnawed at him. And until we do, I'll keep you safe. They passed the time with improvised games. I Spy 20 questions. A makeshift checkers set Sophia created using coins and a grid drawn on paper. Marcus found himself smiling, even laughing occasionally at her antics. When was the last time he had laughed? It was nearly noon when they heard footsteps on the stairs. Marcus immediately tensed, positioning himself between Sophia and the door, his hand moving toward the Beretta. The door opened to reveal Danny, her expression grim. She locked the door behind her and crossed to where they waited. Jake knew a lot more than he was letting on over the phone, she said without preamble. The king is alive, at least he was as of last night. Relief washed over Sophia's face. Papa's alive? Danny nodded, her eyes softening as she looked at the child. According to Jake's source in the police department, King Alexander was injured in what they're calling an attempted kidnapping. He's being treated at a secure location under heavy guard. Not a hospital? Marcus frowned. Too public. They've got him at a private clinic with military-grade security. State Department is involved, apparently. Does he know who's behind the attack? Marcus pressed. Danny hesitated, glancing at Sophia. It's complicated. There's evidence suggesting it was an inside job, someone from Varovnia's own security detail. But there are also international players involved. Victor, Sophia said suddenly, her young face hardening. It's Uncle Victor. Marcus and Danny both turned to her in surprise. Your uncle? Marcus asked gently. Sophia nodded, her hands twisting in her lap. Papa and Uncle Victor fight all the time. Uncle Victor says a girl can't be ruler. He says Papa's destroying our country by changing the laws. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I heard him tell Papa once that he would correct this mistake someday. It aligned with what Marcus had read about the political tensions in Varovnia. Prince Victor, the king's younger brother, vocally opposed the changes to succession laws that would allow Sophia to inherit the throne. Did Jake mention anything about Prince Victor? Marcus asked Danny. Not specifically, but he said there are rumors that certain factions in Varovnia's government are using the king's absence to consolidate power. Danny sat on the coffee table facing them. There's more. Jake says the reason they're keeping the whole thing quiet is because they believe there's still an active threat, specifically against Sophia. Marcus's arm instinctively tightened around the princess's shoulders. They want to finish the job. Danny nodded grimly. Jake's source says they're desperate to find the princess. Both sides are, the good guys and the bad. There's a massive quiet search underway. Did he mention Dr. Bennett, the professor who suddenly left for Belgrade? Marcus asked. I asked about that. Jake says there's a woman, some academic expert on Varovnian politics, who was brought in to help negotiate with the various factions. Could be your doctor. Bennett. Sophia sat very still, processing all this information with remarkable composure for a child her age. I need to see my father, she said finally, her voice small but determined. That's the trick, isn't it? Danny sighed. How do we get you to him without walking into a trap? We don't know which authorities we can trust. Marcus stood pacing the small apartment as he thought. We need a direct line to whoever's protecting the king. Someone who can verify it's really him, that it's safe. Jake mentioned a name. Danny said, the agent in charge of the king's protection detail. American guy, Rayburn, I think. Secret Service or diplomatic security, something like that. Can Jake get us in contact with him? Marcus asked. Danny frowned. Maybe, but it would mean bringing Jake fully into this. Are you ready to trust him that much? Before Marcus could answer, a sharp knock at the door froze them all. Danny raised a finger to her lips, moving silently to the window to peek through the blinds. Black SUV out front, she whispered, her face pale. 2 men in suits. Marcus's heart rate spiked. Get Sophia into the bathroom, he ordered, already drawing his Beretta. Lock the door. Don't come out until I call for you. Danny quickly ushered the princess into the small bathroom while Marcus positioned himself beside the apartment door, gun ready. The knock came again, more insistent. Miss Wilson? A male voice called. Danielle Wilson? Federal agents. We need to speak with you. Marcus and Danny exchanged a panicked glance. How had they found them? Had Jake betrayed them? Had Danny been followed from the cafe? Maze. Wilson, we know you're in there. This concerns a matter of national security. Please open the door. Danny mouthed, what do we do? To Marcus. He weighed their options rapidly. If these were legitimate federal agents who had somehow tracked them here, refusing to cooperate would only escalate the situation. But if they were imposters working for Prince Victor's conspiracy, opening that door could be a death sentence for Sophia. Making a split-second decision, Marcus gestured for Danny to approach the door. Ask to see their identification. He whispered, hold it up to the peephole. I'll check it. Danny nodded, moving to the door. I need to see some ID, she called, her voice admirably steady. Of course, the voice replied. There was a shuffle, then a badge was held up to the peephole. Marcus examined it carefully. It looked authentic, FBI credentials for a special agent Ryan Donovan. But that meant nothing. Badges could be faked. What do you want? Danny asked through the door. We're looking for Marcus Thorne, the agent replied. And the girl who's with him. We have reason to believe they're in danger. Marcus's finger tensed on the trigger of his Beretta. How did they know his name? How did they know about Sophia? I need to make a call to verify you are who you say you are. Danny stalled. Miss Wilson. A different voice spoke now, female, authoritative. I'm Special Agent Lauren Hayes. I understand your caution, but time is critical. We believe Mr. Thorne and his companion are targets of an international assassination team that has already killed 3 people. We're here to place them in protective custody. Marcus's mind raced. This could be legitimate or the most dangerous trap yet. If Marcus Thorne is here, the woman continued, please tell him that SSA Rayburn sent us. The eagle watches over the nightingale. He'll understand. Marcus froze. Rayburn, the name Danny had just mentioned. The agent protecting King Alexander. And that phrase, it was a code. Not any code, but a specific type used in high-level diplomatic protection situations. Marcus had learned about them during a joint training exercise with Diplomatic Security Service years ago. Could it be coincidence? Or had Danny's meeting with Jake Mercer somehow alerted the authorities to their location? Marcus made his decision. Ask them how many agents are present, he whispered to Danny. She repeated the question through the door. 2 in this unit, 4 more securing the perimeter. Agent Hayes responded immediately. That matched standard protocol for a high-risk extraction. Marcus lowered his weapon slightly. 1 more question, he called, moving closer to the door. Who authorized this protective detail? There was a brief pause. Joint authorization, FBI counterterrorism and DSS, at the request of Secretary of State Collins following the attack on King Alexander of Varovnia. The details were too specific, too accurate to be an educated guess by imposters. Marcus exhaled slowly, tucking his weapon into his waistband at the small of his back. Accessible but not threatening. Open it, he told Danny quietly. She unlocked the door, stepping back as it swung open to reveal a man and woman in dark suits, both with the unmistakable bearing of federal agents. The woman, Agent Hayes, immediately focused on Marcus. Mr. Thorne, she said with a nod. Where is the princess? Safe. Marcus replied, not yet ready to reveal Sophia's hiding place. How did you find us? Dr. Eleanor Bennett, Hayes said simply. She's been working with us since the attack. When she couldn't reach the king's contact at the university, she requested we monitor any unusual activity around her office. We identified you on security footage, then traced your movements to the department store, then lost you. Until I met with Jake Mercer, Danny realized. Agent Donovan nodded. Mr. Mercer has been cooperating with our investigation, providing information about unusual diplomatic activity. When you asked about the king, he recognized the connection and contacted us after your meeting. It made sense, but Marcus still hesitated. I need proof the king is alive, and that he's actually under your protection. Hayes reached slowly into her jacket, producing a phone. We anticipated your caution. She tapped the screen, then held it out to Marcus. On the screen was a video of King Alexander, clearly recorded recently. He looked pale, with a bandage visible above his right eye, but very much alive. He spoke directly to the camera. To whoever is protecting my daughter, the eagle watches over the nightingale, and the crown remains unbroken. Bring her home to me. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The coded phrase repeated by the king himself. This was legitimate. Sophia, he called toward the bathroom. You can come out now. It's safe. The bathroom door opened slowly, and Sophia emerged, her face a mixture of fear and hope. When she saw the video still playing on Agent Hayes' phone, she gasped. Papa! She rushed forward, taking the phone from Hayes' hands, staring at her father's image with tears in her eyes. We need to move quickly, Agent Donovan said. The men who attacked the king's motorcade have been tracked to this area. We believe they're close to finding your location. Marcus knelt before Sophia, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. These people are going to take you to your father, he explained softly. You'll be safe now. Sophia looked from Marcus to the agents, then back again, sudden understanding dawning on her young face. You're not coming with me, Hayes answered before Marcus could. Mr. Thorne will travel separately for security reasons, but you'll see him again at the secure location. It was a lie, and Marcus knew it. Once Sophia was safely in federal custody, there would be no reason for her to see him again. Their brief, intense connection would end as suddenly as it had begun. Sophia seemed to understand this too, her eyes filling with fresh tears. No, she said firmly, stepping back from the agents to stand closer to Marcus. I won't go without him. I won't. Sophia, Marcus began gently. You promised, she interrupted, her voice cracking. You promised you wouldn't leave me until I found Papa. The emotion in her voice struck Marcus like a physical blow. He had promised, and despite the logic of the situation, despite knowing that the safest thing was to let her go with these trained professionals, he couldn't bring himself to break that promise. She's right, he said, rising to face Agent Hayes. I promised to stay with her until she's reunited with her father. In person. Hayes and Donovan exchanged glances. That's not protocol, Donovan objected. Then change the protocol, Marcus said firmly. She's been through hell. She trusts me. I'm not letting her out of my sight until I see her safely delivered to her father. Hayes studied him for a long moment, then something in her expression shifted. The king did ask about you, she admitted. When we told him his daughter had been seen with an unidentified man, he seemed relieved when we described you. Please, Sophia said, slipping her small hand into Marcus's much larger one. Please let him come, Hayes sighed. Fine. But we move now, and you follow our lead completely. Understood? Marcus nodded, squeezing Sophia's hand reassuringly. Understood. Everything happened quickly after that. Danny hugged them both goodbye, extracting a promise from Marcus that he wouldn't disappear for another 2 years. The agents escorted them down the back stairs and into an unmarked SUV with tinted windows, Sophia never letting go of Marcus's hand. As the vehicle pulled away from Wilson and Son Automotive, Sophia leaned against Marcus's side, her slight weight a comfort against the uncertainty that lay ahead. Thank you for not leaving, she whispered, barely audible over the engine. Marcus placed a protective arm around her shoulders. I keep my promises, Princess. But as they sped through the city toward whatever awaited them, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this journey, this unexpected connection that had breathed new life into his empty existence, was reaching its inevitable conclusion. Soon, Sophia would be back where she belonged, with her father, in the rarefied world of European royalty. And Marcus Thorne, ex-soldier, would return to his solitary life, carrying the memory of a princess who had, for 2 extraordinary days, made him feel whole again. The motorcade, 3 identical black SUVs traveling in tight formation, wound its way out of the city, taking a circuitous route that Marcus recognized as standard counter-surveillance procedure. Agent Hayes sat up front with the driver, while Donovan sat in the back with Marcus and Sophia. Where are we going? Marcus asked, keeping his voice low so as not to alarm Sophia, who had finally dozed off against his shoulder, exhaustion overtaking her despite the tension of their situation. Secure location about 40 miles outside the city, Donovan replied. Former military installation repurposed for diplomatic security. The king was transferred there yesterday once his condition stabilized. His condition? Concussion, broken collarbone, some lacerations? Could have been much worse. Donovan glanced at the sleeping princess. He's been frantic about her, refused additional pain medication until we found her. Marcus felt a surge of respect for King Alexander. Whatever else he might be, the man clearly loved his daughter deeply. What about the people behind the attack? Marcus pressed. Have you identified them? Donovan hesitated, then apparently decided Marcus had earned some answers. It's complicated. The actual gunmen were mercenaries, ex-military from Eastern Europe, for hire types. But they were working for someone inside the Varavnian royal court. Prince Victor? Marcus guessed. Donovan raised an eyebrow. The princess told you about the family drama, huh? She's perceptive. Yeah, well, she's right to be suspicious of her uncle. We have communications that strongly suggest Prince Victor was involved in planning the attack. But he was careful, maintained plausible deniability. What happens now? Marcus asked. Politically, I mean. Donovan sighed. That's above my pay grade. From what I understand, Varavnia is in a precarious position. With the king injured and out of the country, Victor has seized the opportunity to consolidate power back home. He's claiming temporary regency until his brother returns. Or doesn't return, Marcus said grimly. Exactly. If anything happens to the king or the princess, Donovan left the implication hanging. Marcus instinctively tightened his arm around Sophia's sleeping form. But she's safe now. You found her. We found her because of you, Donovan corrected him. If you hadn't helped her, hadn't protected her, he shook his head. Let's just say the State Department owes you a debt of gratitude. The king, too. The convoy turned onto a less traveled road, heading into more rural terrain. Through the tinted windows, Marcus watched as urban sprawl gave way to scattered farms and then denser forest. He felt a growing sense of unreality. Just 3 days ago, he had been a broken veteran with no purpose, no future to speak of. Now he was escorting a princess to a secret location, involved in an international political crisis. And soon, it would all be over. He would hand Sophia back to her father, and that would be that. The thought left a hollow feeling in his chest. Sophia stirred against him, blinking sleepily. Are we there yet? Almost. Hayes called from the front seat. About 20 more minutes. Sophia sat up, rubbing her eyes. Will Papa be waiting for us? I imagine he'll be the first person you see, Marcus told her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. She studied his face with that uncanny perceptiveness. You're sad. It wasn't a question. Marcus didn't deny it. I'll miss you, he admitted. But I'm happy you'll be back with your father where you belong. Sophia frowned, as if this answer wasn't satisfactory. You could come to Verovnia, she suggested brightly. Papa would give you a job. You could be my special guard. The childish simplicity of her solution nearly broke his heart. I don't think it works that way, Princess. Why not? Papa is the king. He can do anything. Before Marcus could formulate a gentle response, Hayes' voice cut in from the front seat. Something's wrong. Lead vehicle is signaling a problem. Marcus instantly went on alert, scanning their surroundings. They were on a 2-lane road cutting through dense forest, no other vehicles in sight. What is it? He asked, already shifting to place himself more protectively around Sophia. Not sure, Hayes replied tersely. They've slowed down, signaling for us to maintain distance. Marcus's combat instincts flared. This isolated stretch of road would be the perfect place for an ambush. Could the route have been compromised? Shouldn't have been, Donovan said, but his hand had moved to rest near his holstered weapon. Route was classified, chosen just before departure. The lead SUV had indeed slowed dramatically, and their driver matched its pace, maintaining the same distance. Through the windshield, Marcus could see the brake lights of the vehicle ahead flashing in a pattern. Warning signal. Hayes interpreted, her body language shifting to high alert. They've spotted something ahead. Marcus felt Sophia tense beside him. What's happening? She whispered. Just a precaution, he assured her, though his own senses were screaming danger. Everything's going to be fine. The words had barely left his mouth when the world exploded around them. The lead SUV suddenly swerved, then lifted off the ground as a deafening boom shattered the air. Marcus reacted instantly, throwing himself over Sophia and pushing her down to the floor of the vehicle as their own driver executed a hard-braking maneuver. Roadside bomb, Hayes shouted, drawing her weapon. Ambush! The next moments passed in a chaotic blur. Their SUV skidded to a stop as the lead vehicle, now engulfed in flames, blocked the narrow road ahead. The third SUV in their convoy pulled alongside them, agents inside already returning fire at unseen assailants in the tree line. Stay down, Marcus ordered Sophia, who had curled into a tight ball beneath him, her small body trembling. The familiar sound of automatic weapons fire triggered his combat reflexes, adrenaline flooding his system. We need to move, Donovan shouted, already opening his door to provide covering fire. Vehicles too exposed. Hayes turned in her seat, her face grim. There's a defense position established by the third vehicle. We need to get the princess there. Ready on my mark. Marcus nodded, gathering Sophia closer. I'll carry her. You provide cover. Bullets pinged against the armored exterior of their SUV, the impact like hailstones on a tin roof. Through the windshield, Marcus could see agents from the third vehicle had established a perimeter, using their SUV as a shield while returning fire toward the forest. Now, Hayes commanded, throwing open her door and moving to provide cover. Marcus lifted Sophia into his arms, tucking her head against his chest. Keep your eyes closed, he instructed. Don't look up no matter what. I've got you. Then they were moving, bursting from the relative safety of the vehicle into the open air, filled with gunfire and smoke. Marcus ran in a crouch, following Hayes while Donovan covered their rear. 20 yards to the defense position. 15. 10. A bullet whizzed past Marcus's ear, close enough that he felt its passage disturb the air. Another struck the ground near his feet, kicking up dirt and gravel. But his focus remained absolute. Get Sophia to safety. Nothing else mattered. They reached the perimeter where 4 agents had created a defensive semicircle around their vehicle. One agent was down, another applying pressure to a wound in his colleague's thigh. Status? Hayes demanded as they took cover behind the SUV. At least 6 hostiles in the tree line. One agent reported, pausing to fire several rounds. Professional. Military-grade weapons. They hit the lead vehicle with an IED, then opened fire from multiple positions. Marcus set Sophia down in the most protected position, against the wheel well of the SUV with armored panels on 3 sides. Stay here, he told her firmly. Don't move unless one of us tells you to. Her face was pale with terror, but she nodded, her eyes locked on his face as if it were the only stable thing in a world gone mad. We've called for backup, Donovan informed them, checking his magazine before returning fire. Air support is 15 minutes out. We may not have 15 minutes, Hayes replied grimly. Marcus assessed the situation with the cold clarity that combat had taught him. They were pinned down. The attackers had chosen the ground perfectly. elevated positions in dense cover, firing down on an exposed stretch of road. This wasn't an opportunistic attack. It was a carefully planned ambush, which meant someone had leaked their route. Someone inside. As if reading his thoughts, Donovan said quietly, "This wasn't random. They knew exactly where we'd be." "Focus on the now," Marcus replied, borrowing his old sergeant's mantra. "We need to change the tactical situation." He peered around the edge of the SUV, analyzing the pattern of fire. Most seemed to be coming from a densely wooded slope about 50 yards to their west. If someone could flank that position while the others provided covering fire, "I need a weapon," he said to Hayes. She hesitated only briefly before handing him her backup pistol, a compact Glock. "What are you thinking? They're concentrated in that section of trees," Marcus explained, indicating the area with a nod. "If I can circle around through that drainage ditch and approach from the side, I might be able to disrupt their position enough for the rest of you to fall back to better cover." Hayes looked skeptical. "That's a suicide run. Not if you provide adequate covering fire." Marcus checked the Glock, familiarizing himself with the weapon. "I've done this before. In Afghanistan," Donovan surmised. Marcus nodded. "The principle's the same whether it's Taliban or mercenaries." Hayes exchanged a look with Donovan, then made a decision. "Covering fire on my mark. Make it count, Thorne." Marcus turned to Sophia, who was watching him with wide, frightened eyes. "I have to help make it safe," he told her gently. "I'll be right back." "Promise?" she whispered. There it was again, that simple request for reassurance, for his word. Marcus found he couldn't make a promise he might not be able to keep. "Be brave, princess," he said instead, touching her cheek briefly. "Remember what I taught you." Then he was moving, crouched and ready. Hayes shouted the order, and all agents opened fire simultaneously, directing a barrage toward the tree line that temporarily forced the attackers to duck for cover. Marcus used that moment to sprint to the drainage ditch that ran alongside the road. He slid down the embankment and began moving rapidly through the shallow depression, staying low to use it as cover. Mud and stagnant water soaked his clothes, but he pushed forward with single-minded focus. The noise of the firefight grew slightly distant as he worked his way around to the western side of the ambush position. Every movement was calculated, drawing on years of training and combat experience. This was what he was built for, the purpose for which he had been molded by war. When he judged he was approximately parallel to the attacker's position, he began to climb the slope, moving from tree to tree for cover. Through the foliage, he could make out figures in tactical gear, 5 or 6 of them, their attention focused on the road where the agents and Sophia remained pinned down. Marcus waited for a moment when their fire intensified, using the noise to mask his approach. Then he was upon them, taking the first man down with a blow to the back of the head before he even realized Marcus was there. The others turned in alarm, but Marcus had the element of surprise. He fired twice, dropping one attacker with shots to the chest, then dove for cover as the others returned fire. The woods erupted in chaos as the mercenaries suddenly found themselves under attack from an unexpected direction. In the confusion, Marcus moved again, circling to a new position, firing strategically to create the impression of multiple attackers. An old guerrilla tactic: appear stronger than you are, create confusion in superior numbers. From the road, Hayes and the other agents recognized what was happening and intensified their fire, creating a devastating crossfire that caught the ambushers between two forces. One of the attackers, a tall man with the bearing of a commander, shouted orders in a language Marcus didn't recognize. 3 of the remaining mercenaries began to fall back deeper into the woods while the commander provided covering fire. Marcus couldn't allow them to escape and potentially regroup. He moved swiftly, cutting off their retreat path, firing with precision despite the chaotic environment. One of the retreating men fell. Another returned fire wildly before a shot from the road, one of the federal agents, caught him in the shoulder. The commander, seeing his plan disintegrating, made a desperate decision. Instead of continuing to fire at the agents on the road or at Marcus in the woods, he turned and began running directly toward the SUVs, toward Sophia. Marcus's blood ran cold as he realized the man's intention, not to escape, but to complete the mission even at the cost of his own life. Kill the princess at any cost. "Hayes!" Marcus shouted, already sprinting through the underbrush. Front approach. On the road, the agents reacted, shifting their fire to the lone figure charging their position. But the commander was moving erratically, making himself a difficult target, and he had a significant head start on Marcus. Marcus burst from the tree line just as the commander reached the perimeter the agents had established. Gunfire erupted at close range, and an agent went down. The commander vaulted over the fallen agent, a knife now in his hand as he drove toward the SUV where Sophia was hidden. Time seemed to slow. Marcus saw Hayes turn, saw her weapon come up too late, saw Donovan struggling to get a clear shot without risking hitting Sophia, saw the commander's face, scarred down the right cheek just as Sophia had described, contorted with murderous determination as he closed in on his target. Marcus didn't think. He simply acted. Throwing himself forward in a flying tackle, he intercepted the commander mere feet from where Sophia huddled against the wheel well. They crashed to the ground, the commander's knife slashing wildly as they grappled in the dirt. A burning pain seared across Marcus's chest as the blade found flesh, but adrenaline muted the sensation. He locked his hands around the commander's wrist, desperately trying to control the knife, while the man's free hand pummeled his wounded arm, sending shocks of agony through his already injured body. "Marcus!" Sophia's terrified scream cut through the chaos. The sound of her voice, the fear in it, ignited something primal in Marcus. With a roar that contained all the rage and pain he'd suppressed for years, he wrenched the commander's arm at an impossible angle. Bones snapped audibly, and the knife fell from suddenly nerveless fingers. The commander howled in pain but didn't surrender. He headbutted Marcus, momentarily dazing him, then reached for a secondary weapon at his ankle. A single gunshot cracked the air. The commander collapsed, a bullet hole in his temple. Behind him stood Agent Hayes, her weapon still raised, expression cold and professional. "Clear," she called as the remaining agents confirmed that the other attackers were either down or had fled deeper into the forest. Marcus rolled off the dead commander, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Blood soaked the front of his shirt where the knife had cut a long slash across his chest. His earlier gunshot wound had reopened, adding to the crimson stain spreading down his arm. But his eyes sought only one thing, Sophia. She was still in her protected position, frozen in horror at the violence she had witnessed. When her gaze met his, something broke in her expression, and she bolted from her hiding place. "Sophia, wait!" Hayes called, but the princess was already running to Marcus's side, heedless of the danger that might still lurk in the surrounding forest. "You're hurt," Sophia cried, dropping to her knees beside him, her small hands hovering uncertainly over his bloody chest. "Just a scratch," Marcus lied, forcing a reassuring smile despite the pain radiating through his body. "I've had worse." "Don't lie," she scolded, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged face. "You're bleeding." Donovan appeared with a first aid kit, kneeling beside them. "Medics are on the way with backup," he said, quickly assessing Marcus's injuries. "Chopper ETA, 3 minutes." He pressed a gauze pad against the chest wound, instructing Sophia to hold it in place while he attended to the reopened gunshot wound. The little princess followed his directions with solemn concentration, her hands steadier than they had any right to be. "Did we get them all?" Marcus asked Hayes, who stood guard over them, her weapon still at the ready. "At least 4 neutralized. 2 possibly escaped into the woods, but we'll track them." She glanced down at him, something like respect in her gaze. "That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen, Thorn." "Thin line between the two," Marcus replied with a grimace as Donovan tightened a pressure bandage around his arm. The distant thrum of helicopter rotors grew steadily louder, and soon a Black Hawk appeared over the treetops, hovering briefly before setting down on the road a short distance away. Medical personnel and tactical gear poured out, followed by more armed agents who immediately began securing the perimeter. Everything moved quickly after that. Marcus was loaded onto a stretcher despite his protests that he could walk. Sophia refused to leave his side, holding his hand with fierce determination as they were both guided to the helicopter. "The princess travels in the first chopper," a newly arrived commander ordered. "Thorn can go in the second with the other wounded." "No." Sophia's voice rang out with surprising authority for a child. "He stays with me. I won't go without him." The commander looked startled, unused to being contradicted, especially by a 9-year-old. Agent Hayes stepped in. "Sir, the princess has been through a severe trauma. Thorn is the only constant figure through her ordeal. For her psychological well-being, I recommend keeping them together." The commander hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Fine, but secure the area. We can't risk another ambush during extraction." As medics worked to stabilize Marcus inside the helicopter, Sophia sat beside him, refusing to relinquish his hand even when asked to move aside. She watched with intense concentration as they cut away his shirt, cleaned and properly bandaged his wounds, and started an IV to replace lost fluids. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked the lead medic, her voice small but insistent. "He's lost some blood, but the wounds aren't life-threatening," the woman assured her. "He's tough," "I know," Sophia said with absolute certainty. "He saved me. Twice." The helicopter lifted off, carrying them away from the ambush site toward the secure facility where King Alexander waited. As they rose above the treetops, Marcus felt a curious lightness that wasn't entirely due to blood loss or the aircraft's ascent. He had faced death again, had stepped willingly into its path. Not for his country this time, not for an abstract cause, but for this one child whose hand still gripped his with surprising strength. And in doing so, he had found something he thought he'd lost forever in the mountains of Afghanistan: purpose, meaning, the knowledge that his life still had value. Sophia leaned close to his ear, her voice barely audible above the chopper's engine. "You didn't promise to come back," she said, a hint of accusation in her tone. "But you did anyway." Marcus managed a weak smile. "Some promises don't need to be spoken, Princess." She nodded sagely, as if this made perfect sense to her. "Papa will make you a knight for this. Or give you a medal. Or both." The innocence of her certainty, her belief that her father could somehow adequately reward the man who had risked his life for her, warmed something in Marcus's chest that had nothing to do with his injury. "I don't need medals," he told her softly. "Keeping you safe is enough." As the helicopter carried them toward a reunion that would inevitably mean their separation, Marcus found himself memorizing Sophia's face, the determined set of her small jaw, the intelligence in her dark eyes, the way her brow furrowed when she was worried. This remarkable child had, in the space of 3 days, reminded him what it meant to live for something beyond mere survival. Whatever happened next, whether he ever saw her again after today or not, that gift was something no one could take away. The secure facility turned out to be a sprawling compound nestled in a valley, surrounded by forested hills and protected by multiple layers of security. From the air, it resembled a small college campus, several buildings arranged around a central courtyard, with guard towers disguised as architectural features, and a helipad on the eastern edge. As their helicopter descended, Marcus could see figures rushing toward the landing zone, medical personnel with a gurney, security teams establishing a perimeter, and a lone man leaning heavily on a cane, surrounded by protective agents. "Papa!" Sophia cried, pressing her face to the window as she recognized the figure. The instant the helicopter touched down and the rotors began to slow, Sophia was straining at her safety harness, desperate to be released. A medic helped unbuckle her, but kept a cautioning hand on her shoulder until the all-clear was given. The moment the door slid open, Sophia bolted from the aircraft, flying across the tarmac toward her father. King Alexander dropped his cane and knelt, arms outstretched, heedless of the pain the movement must have caused his injured body. Sophia crashed into his embrace with such force that he nearly toppled backward, but he didn't seem to care, clutching his daughter to his chest as if he might never let go. Marcus watched from the helicopter doorway, where medics were helping him onto a waiting gurney, despite his insistence that he could walk. There was something intensely private about the reunion playing out before him. A father and daughter finding each other after facing death, after fearing the worst. He felt suddenly like an intruder witnessing a moment that wasn't meant for his eyes, yet he couldn't look away. The raw emotion on the king's face as he held his daughter, the love, the relief, the lingering fear, struck a chord deep within Marcus. This was what he had fought for. This was what made the pain, the danger, the blood worth it. As the medics wheeled his gurney toward a building marked with a universal medical symbol, Marcus saw Sophia pull away from her father's embrace. She spoke urgently to him, pointing back toward the helicopter. The king listened intently, his expression changing from confusion to understanding to something Marcus couldn't quite identify. Then, to Marcus's surprise, King Alexander retrieved his cane and began making his way toward the medical building, one arm still around Sophia's shoulders, his pace determined despite his obvious discomfort. Inside the medical facility, Marcus was transferred to an examination room where doctors immediately began a more thorough assessment of his injuries. They had just cut away the field bandages to examine the knife wound across his chest when the door opened. "Your Majesty," one of the doctors said, straightening in surprise, "you should be resting." "I will rest when I have spoken with this man," the king replied in accented but perfect English. Despite the medical gown he wore and the various bandages visible on his face and shoulder, he carried himself with unmistakable authority. "Please give us a moment." The medical team exchanged glances but complied, stepping out of the room after ensuring Marcus was stable. Sophia remained at her father's side, her small hand clasped in his larger one, her eyes never leaving Marcus. For a moment, no one spoke. King Alexander studied Marcus with an intensity that seemed to look straight through to his soul. He was younger than Marcus had expected, perhaps early 40s, with features that Sophia had clearly inherited. The same dark eyes, the same determined set of the jaw. "So," the king finally said, "you are the man who saved my daughter's life." Marcus shook his head slightly. "I just helped her find her way back to you, your majesty." "That is not how Sophia tells it." The king's gaze softened as he looked down at his daughter. "She says you fought like a lion to protect her, that you were wounded twice in her defense." "I did what anyone would do," Marcus insisted. King Alexander smiled faintly. "No, Mr. Thorn. Not anyone. Very few, in fact." He paused, his expression growing more solemn. "My security detail was compromised. My own brother plotted against me, against my child. In a world where I could trust so few, fate sent Sophia to perhaps the one man in this city who would risk everything for a child he did not know. She's easy to care about," Marcus said simply. Sophia beamed at him, then tugged at her father's hand. "I told you he was special, Papa. I knew right away." The king nodded gravely. "Children often see what adults miss." He stepped closer to Marcus's bedside. "I owe you a debt that can never fully be repaid, Mr. Thorn. By the ancient laws of Varovnia, when a commoner saves the life of royalty, they are granted one request that cannot be denied, so long as it is within the crown's power to grant." Marcus blinked in surprise. "That's not necessary, your majesty. Nevertheless, it is our way." The king's tone brooked no argument. "When you have recovered, you will tell me your request." Before Marcus could protest further, Sophia piped up. "He can come to Varovnia. He can be my special guard." King Alexander smiled indulgently at his daughter. "That would be Mr. Thorn's decision, little one. Perhaps he has a life here he does not wish to leave." The words hung in the air, and Marcus found he had no ready answer. A life here? His empty apartment, his isolation, his nights staring at the ceiling while memories haunted him. Was that a life worth clinging to? "We shall discuss possibilities later." The king continued, seeing Marcus's discomfort. "For now you must rest and heal." He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, his touch unexpectedly warm. "And know that whatever you decide, you will always have friends in Varovnia." A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. The door opened to reveal Agent Hayes, her expression tight with suppressed urgency. "Your Majesty, I apologize for the interruption, but we need to move you and the princess to a more secure location immediately. We've received intelligence suggesting a secondary attack may be imminent." The king's face hardened. "My brother is persistent, it seems. We believe Prince Victor has dispatched additional teams when the first failed to report success." Hayes confirmed, "The helicopter is ready whenever you are." King Alexander nodded, then turned back to Marcus. "It seems our conversation must be continued another time." He bowed slightly, a gesture of profound respect from a monarch to a commoner. "Until we meet again, Marcus Thorn." Sophia broke away from her father and rushed to Marcus's side. Before anyone could stop her, she had climbed onto the edge of the bed and thrown her arms around his neck, careful to avoid his bandaged chest. "Thank you," she whispered fiercely in his ear. "I won't forget you. Ever." Then she pulled back, her young face solemn as she reached into the pocket of her hoodie. She withdrew a small object that glinted in the harsh medical lighting, a delicate silver pin in the shape of a star. "This was my mother's," she said, pressing it into Marcus's palm. "Papa gave it to me for my birthday. It's a star to guide you home." She closed his fingers around it. "So you can find your way to Varovnia someday." Before Marcus could respond, she had hopped down and returned to her father's side. The king placed a protective arm around her shoulders, nodded once more to Marcus, and then they were gone, whisked away by agents into the gathering darkness outside. Marcus lay back on the examination table, suddenly exhausted as the adrenaline that had sustained him finally ebbed. He opened his hand to look at Sophia's gift, a small silver star, intricately crafted, probably worth more than everything he owned. A star to guide you home. Was there such a thing as home anymore? Could there be? As the medical team returned to continue treating his wounds, Marcus closed his fingers around the silver star, feeling its points press into his palm. A physical reminder that for 3 extraordinary days, he had mattered to someone. Had been someone's protector, someone's hero. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus Thorn fell asleep without fear of what dreams might come. 1 year later, the Varovnian countryside unfolded before Marcus like a scene from a fairy tale. Rolling green hills, ancient forests, and in the distance the spires of Kronenberg Castle rising against a cerulean sky. His rental car hugged the winding road as he navigated the unfamiliar terrain, following the directions programmed into the GPS. It had been 6 months since the official invitation had arrived at his new apartment, cream-colored stationery bearing the royal seal of Varovnia, requesting his presence at the 10th birthday celebration of Her Royal Highness, Princess Sofia Eleonora Katerina Volkov. 6 months of hesitation, of doubt, of wondering if he should reopen a chapter he had told himself was closed. In the end, it was Danny who had convinced him to accept. "You've spent a year rebuilding your life," she'd said during one of their weekly dinners. "New job, therapy, even a social life of sorts. But you still carry that silver star everywhere you go. Maybe it's time to see where it leads." So here he was, driving through a country he'd barely heard of before that rainy evening when a lost princess had changed his life. The past year had brought remarkable changes. With a commendation from the State Department and a personal reference from King Alexander, delivered through diplomatic channels, Marcus had secured a position with a private security firm specializing in VIP protection. The work suited him, structured enough to provide stability, varied enough to keep the shadows at bay. He'd maintained regular communication with Sofia through carefully monitored channels. Letters at first, then occasional video calls once the security situation in Varovnia stabilized. Prince Victor had been exposed and stripped of his titles after evidence of his conspiracy came to light. He now lived in exile, his power diminished but not his resentment, according to reports. Sofia's letters were a window into a world Marcus could barely imagine. Royal duties, diplomatic functions, and the everyday concerns of a child growing up in the public eye. But beneath the tales of castle life and protocol lessons was still the same brave, perceptive girl who had held his hand through gunfire and fear. The GPS announced his approach to the security checkpoint that guarded the private royal residence where the birthday celebration would be held. Marcus presented his credentials to stone-faced guards who examined his invitation carefully before waving him through with newfound deference once his identity was confirmed. The estate was magnificent, a centuries-old summer palace surrounded by manicured gardens and ancient oak trees. Staff directed him to a parking area where several luxury vehicles already stood, then to a reception room where other guests mingled, many in formal attire that made Marcus grateful for the new suit Danny had insisted he purchase for the occasion. He felt distinctly out of place among the assembled dignitaries and aristocrats, their conversations flowing around him in languages he didn't understand. Just as he was considering retreating to a quiet corner, a familiar voice called his name. "Mr. Thorne!" "Doctor." Eleanor Bennett approached, elegant in a simple blue dress, her smile warm and genuine. "I was hoping to see you here. Dr. Kasushuranier." "Bennett," Marcus greeted her, relieved to see a somewhat familiar face. They had spoken briefly during the investigation that followed the ambush, but never at length. "Please, it's Eleanor," she insisted, guiding him toward a less crowded area. "I've wanted to thank you properly for some time. What you did for Sofia, for all of Varovnia, really, was extraordinary." Marcus shook his head. "I just helped a lost child." "A lost child who happened to be the key to a stable succession," Eleanor corrected gently. "Had Prince Victor's plot succeeded, Varovnia would likely be in the midst of civil conflict now. Instead, the reforms have continued, and Sofia will one day be a queen prepared to lead her country into a progressive future." Before Marcus could respond, a hush fell over the room as a side door opened. King Alexander entered, looking much healthier than when Marcus had last seen him. The lingering effects of his injuries were visible only in a slight stiffness to his gait, largely disguised by his regal bearing. And beside him, in a simple but elegant blue dress that matched her eyes, walked Princess Sofia. She had grown taller in the past year, her face losing some of its childish roundness, but her eyes still held the same keen intelligence, the same quiet determination. Protocol demanded that guests wait to be addressed by royalty, but the moment Sofia spotted Marcus across the room, all decorum was forgotten. With a cry of delight that turned every head, she broke away from her father's side and ran full tilt toward Marcus, nearly knocking him over as she crashed into his embrace. "You came!" she exclaimed, hugging him fiercely. "You really came!" Marcus found himself laughing, lifting her slightly off her feet in a spontaneous gesture that would have horrified the protocol officers hovering nearby. "I promised, didn't I?" She pulled back to study his face, her expression suddenly serious. "You look better, happier." "I am," he admitted, touched by her perception. King Alexander approached at a more measured pace, smiling at the reunion. "Mr. Thorn, he said warmly, extending his hand. Welcome to Varovnia. Thank you for inviting me, Your Majesty. Marcus shook the king's hand, noting the strength in his grip. It was not my invitation, but Sophia's. Alexander confessed with a fond glance at his daughter. Though I fully supported it, you have been greatly missed in our household. Sophia tugged at Marcus's hand. I have so much to show you. The gardens, the old tower, my horses. Sophia, her father gently interrupted. Perhaps Mr. Thorn would like to refresh himself after his journey before you drag him all over the estate. She looked momentarily crestfallen, then brightened. Of course, you must be tired. But after you rest, will you walk with me in the gardens? I'd be honored, Princess, Marcus replied, unable to resist her enthusiasm. A staff member was summoned to show Marcus to his guest quarters, a suite that seemed larger than his entire apartment back home, overlooking the spectacular gardens. As he freshened up, changing into more casual attire for the promised garden walk, Marcus found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. One random act of kindness on a rainy evening had altered the trajectory of his life completely. The broken soldier who had once contemplated ending his pain now woke each day with purpose, with connections, with a future he could envision. When he emerged onto the garden terrace, Sophia was waiting, having also changed into more casual clothes, though her idea of casual still included what appeared to be custom-designed jeans and a cashmere sweater. A single bodyguard stood at a discreet distance, a reminder that despite the peaceful surroundings, the threats of the past had not been entirely forgotten. This way, Sophia said, taking his hand with the easy familiarity they had established during those dangerous days a year ago. I want to show you my favorite place. She led him along winding paths through formal gardens that gradually gave way to more natural landscaping. They talked as they walked, Sophia eager to hear about his new job, his friendship with Danny, his progress in therapy. In turn, she shared stories of her life in the palace, her studies, her dreams for the future. Papa says I can attend university abroad when I'm older, she confided as they reached a small rise overlooking a pristine lake. Perhaps in America. Would you visit me there? I imagine your security detail might have something to say about that, Marcus replied with a smile. Sophia rolled her eyes in a thoroughly un-princess-like gesture. They're very protective. Sometimes too much so. I told Papa that none of them would have found me that night the way you did. They reached what was evidently their destination, a small gazebo nestled among ancient trees, offering a panoramic view of the lake and mountains beyond. Inside, someone had thoughtfully provided refreshments, a pitcher of lemonade and small pastries arranged on a silver tray. As they settled onto the cushioned bench, Sophia grew unexpectedly serious. You still have it, she said, nodding toward Marcus's chest. He followed her gaze to where the silver star pin was fastened to his shirt, a habit he had developed over the past year, keeping it always with him. Of course, he said softly. It's my most treasured possession. She smiled, pleased. Did it work? Did it guide you home? The question caught him off guard, more profound than she perhaps realized. Had he found home? Not a place, but a state of being, of belonging, of purpose, of peace. I think, he said carefully, it guided me towards something even more important. It reminded me that I was still capable of caring deeply about something, someone beyond myself, that I could still make a difference. Sophia nodded, seeming to understand despite her youth. Papa says that saving people works both ways, that sometimes the rescuer needs rescuing too. Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. Your father is a wise man. He wants to ask you something, Sophia continued, suddenly intent on rearranging the pastries on their plate. But he's nervous about it. The king? Nervous? Marcus found this hard to believe. He doesn't want to presume, she explained, selecting a pastry with careful deliberation. But I told him you would at least consider it. Consider what, exactly? Sophia looked up, meeting his gaze directly. Staying. Here in Varovnia, Papa has created a new position, head of Princess's security detail. The person would be responsible for my safety, for training my guards, for establishing protocols. She paused, then added with studied casualness, he thinks you would be perfect for it. Marcus stared at her, momentarily speechless. Sophia ... I don't know what to say. Say yes, she urged, her composure breaking as excitement bubbled through. You could live here, in the palace complex. You already speak some Varovnian. I've heard you practicing during our calls. And you wouldn't have to wear those awful suits every day just for special occasions. The thought was both overwhelming and strangely appealing. To leave behind his rebuilding life in America, to start fresh in a country he barely knew. It was madness. And yet, I would need to think about it, he said carefully. It's a big decision. Sophia nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Of course. Papa said you would say that. She hesitated, then added, but you will think about it. Really think about it. Looking at her hopeful face, this remarkable child who had somehow claimed a piece of his heart during those terrifying days, Marcus found he couldn't lie to her. Yes, Princess, I really will. Her smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Yeah, good. Because I have a feeling, Marcus Thorne, the same feeling I had when I first saw you in the rain. You belong here. With us. She touched the silver star on his shirt gently. This has been calling you home all along. As they sat together in the peaceful gazebo, the Varovnian landscape spread before them like a promise. Marcus felt something settling in his soul, a sense of possibility he had thought forever lost in the mountains of Afghanistan. Whether he ultimately accepted the king's offer or not, he knew with sudden clarity that his life would never again be defined solely by what he had lost. The lost soldier had found his way back to the light, and the lost princess had been his unexpected guide. In saving her, he had saved himself. And in that simple truth lay a peace he had never thought to find again.